friends, today's topic of discussion is social reform in Hindi films, colonial times. Today we'll talk about the kind of cinema which was made during the colonial period and how it was linked to some of the films, how they were linked to the idea of the social reform. As we are aware that in India, especially during the colonial period, social religious reform movements, they were being undertaken, and some of the concerns of the social religious reform movement leaders were to reform the society in a certain manner, that the issues which are concerning women, or for that matter untouchability in caste system, they could be reformed. And what we could see is the reverberations of these kinds of ideas in some of the Hindi films which were made during the colonial times. So we'll talk about that, how cinema definitely played an important role in terms of bringing about those kinds of reforms. When people they went and saw these films, then how they were in a sense influenced by those kinds of ideas which were being communicated by the filmmakers. So how filmmakers they also acted as some kind of reformers by showing these ideas and trying to reform the existing evils in the society. So that was one of the important concerns of that time, and how we also see that British, as they were engaged in an arbitrary and politically inspired censorship policy. So British, they were not concerned when these kinds of films they were being made. They were not censored by the colonial authorities, because they were more concerned with the ideas of revolution. They were more concerned with the idea of democracy which was being exhibited in some of the films, and how the national movement also got reflected in the cinema. So British, they were not much concerned with the theme of social reform which could be seen in many of the films of that particular period. So in our course of discussion, we'll talk about some of the themes of these films. We'll talk about the film itself by some of the noted directors, those who were making such kind of cinema time and again. So before coming to that, we also see that how the cinema as a cultural vehicle, it is very important in the ideas of reform which could be seen in some of these films, and how the contribution of the personalities, those who were associated with the social religious reform movements, in raising the consciousness of the masses. And when we talk about the reformers, we see that some of the reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, for example, or Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, they were in a way talking about the idea of reform, and Sati was rejected in that sense by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and he cited a number of scriptures which were not in favor of Sati. And widow remarriage was promoted by the reformers, and we also see in later times the social ideas of Swami Dayanand's Arya Samaj movement, which was against idolatry, which was against polytheism, which was against belief in magic, charms and animal sacrifices, and pleaded for widow remarriage and condemned child marriages. So we find that these kinds of thinkers like Swami Dayanand, he also played an important role in terms of any kinds of existing evils in the society. And we also see that before that also reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, they were also engaged. So in that sense, in the later times when Vivekananda also came, Swami Vivekananda's ideas, they were also being seen in a framework of nationalism, and his ideas were quite radical. And we find that how he also rejected untouchability in caste system and believed in the service of humanity. And similarly, when you take that framework into the national movement, we see that how Gandhi was also arguing with regard to the removal of untouchability. So when these kinds of ideas they were seen in the context of the national movement, and we also see that films they were also taking some inspiration from the national movement, and many of the concerns of the national movement they got reflected in the films as well, not only in the framework of the dialogues, but we also see in framework of the symbols, etc. And when the symbols of the national movement they were being exhibited in the films, then how they were able to generate emotions, and how people were getting excited in that sense when they were participating in the national movement, that all could be seen at that point of time. And how these symbols they were playing an important role in creating the appropriate emotional response or climate among the audience as well. So from that point of view, the significance of cinema could be seen, it could be understood that many scholars, they have talked about that how it could be seen as a cultural agent of change, and it is also a mirror of society as well. And as we are aware that social change is a very gradual kind of a process, it does not come very fast, and over a period of time when these kinds of ideas they are being given to the masses or the society, then these kind of changes they could be seen in the society as well. So in that framework, we find that how cinema definitely is playing an important role as in the framework of communication, education. In that framework, it was not only educating, but it was also communicating those kinds of ideas which the people they wanted to communicate to that particular kind of audience. And we find that when one is talking about cinema, then we not only talk about the film, but we also talk about the relations between the film and the extra filmic elements, the director who has made that film, how the reviews of that particular film they are being taken, and how public is viewing that particular film, and the state as well, the government and the state, how they tend to understand that particular cinema. So we understand it, not only the work but also the reality the work is representing. And as we talked about symbols, we also see that these symbols are very culture specific, and they may have different meanings in different societies. And so it is very important to in a way see film's narrative, its sets and the language. So in that context, that how we read the film rather than seeing the film, this is one of the approaches that cinema should be seen in the framework of some kind of a reading by the people, those who are watching films. And we see that when one is talking about cinema in a kind of society which was the colonial society in the context of India, then we find that people they were not educated because of the crumbling of the education structure by the British, that how the gurukuls and system during the period when the British came to India, it was in a way destroyed by the British. And we also see that newspapers and books they were not there in the kind of spread which was there. And when a society is illiterate in that sense, then newspapers and books they will not be of much value as not much value as well, because we will find that they are not people those who are literate, those who are going to read about them. So we find that how the kind of social change which was required it could come, and in the earlier period we find that the bhakti preachers etc. they played an important role in spreading the ideas of social revolution, and they were traveling the length and breadth of the country to propagate their ideas. And we also see that at the same time, many times what happens is that the various kinds of folk media in the framework of street theatre, nukkad natak for that matter, or for the example Jatra in Bengal or Notanki in UP, all these kinds of folk arts they were also disseminating certain messages which were there in the society through them. So film as a technological medium, film as a medium which had a lot of potential in terms of propagating certain ideas was very important. And we see that how it was being used by some of the Indians. One of the films by D.N. Ganguly, England Returned, was used as a means to get audience to think of a social situation in which Indians had been imitating their foreign rulers and creating for themselves new problems within their own society. So it was a spoof on the westernized Indians. So that particular film, because what we have seen in the 19th century, that how when English education was introduced in India, there were so many Indians those who took up to the English education, and when this English education was taken up by them, many times we find that they hooked to it in such a manner that they were trying to show themselves as anglicized Indians. So many times their dressing pattern, their way of speaking, all that was trying to show that they are different from the masses which were the Indian masses. So such kind of portrayals, especially we talked about Bilat Ferit or England Returned, which was trying to in a way talk about the stereotypes which had come into the society. Then we also see that realistic cinema could also be seen from 1920s, and Babu Rao Painter made film called Shavkari Pash, which painted an extremely realistic picture of the Indian poor in the rural wasteland, which was focusing on the rural indebtedness, feudal oppression, poverty of peasantry, and myriad of problems which were there in the society. And this film was made in 1925. It was a silent, because we see the silent cinema till 1931, till the arrival of Alamara, which was the first talkie of India. So we see that these kinds of portrayals, these kinds of films, they were trying to reform the society in a manner that when the Indian poor, they will be given some kind of a support by either the government or at the level of the society as well, then only their situation is going to improve. We also see that in this film V. Shantaram acted, and he acted the role of an oppressed farmer couple along with Kamala Devi, and how they both suffer this famine and the oppression of the zamindari system as well. So the brave efforts were being created in that sense to similar thematic films which were commenting on the other social ills of the Indian society as well. So what we find is that such kind of portrayals, they were not only realistic in that sense, they were trying to project the reality in a particular manner, but at the same time we also see that they also opened the kind of an arena or the gateways for such kind of cinema in future as well. And when one is talking about the various kinds of issues which were there in society, then we find that with regard to women, we talked about the female infanticide, or for example the prohibition of the child marriage, women's emancipation. All these kinds of issues, they were linked to the women, and dowry system was prevalent, or mismatched marriages which were happening in the society. All they were linked to the concerns of the women, and how these kinds of changes which could be brought about in the society, and some kind of reform in the caste system, untouchability could be seen, where more equality or rather equality comes to the society, to all the individuals of the society. And Hindu-Muslim unity, which was one of the concerns of that period, that could also be talked about. And we find that how during that particular period, all these kinds of concerns, they also got reflected in some of the films of these times, when the filmmakers they made these films and they wanted to communicate to the audience about these kinds of issues. We also see that in 1931 Devdasi was a film which was titled which was made by Naval Gandhi. It was titled as Bride of Gods in English, and it was talking about the ancient system of condemning girls to lifelong servitude in the temples. And we find that this film was talking about the Devdasi system. And another film was Krishna Company's Whose Fault, which was based on K. Munchi's novel, and it was about a widow who was exploited by society, who turns defiant and breaks the traditions as well. So such kind of films which were trying to create an alternative kind of idea in the society, and how we find that the kind of existing problems in the society, how they could be rectified, it could also be seen in these kinds of films. And another film called Wrath, directed by R.S. Chaudhary, it was dealing with poverty, untouchability and social inequality, and it had a character called Garib Das, who played by a Parsi actor Makanda, who was drawn in exact image of Mahatma Gandhi. And the Bombay censors, they heavily cut the scenes and got it renamed as Khuda Ki Shan, or the Glory of God. So we find that how when some kind of portrayals which were dealing with the issues in the society, which were dealing with the issue of social inequality and untouchability, then we find that they were in a way rejected by the censors. They were not ready that such kind of portrayals, they should be there in the society. And how the movement which was led by Gandhi, it was also making a mark at that point of time. We also see that apart from that, some other films, they were also being made at that point of time, which was dealing with some of the issues like religious dogmatism, or the kind of rituals which are there in the society, or the kind of priestly hierarchy which was there in the society as well. And this kind of a tyranny which was there which was existing in the society, in the political framework, how it was to be done away with, And we also see that in one of the films like Amrit Manthan, which was made in 1934, and the issue was about the obnoxious practice of human and animal sacrifice, and the film said the scriptures recommending were to be reinterpreted. So cinema was talking in that particular framework that if we have certain kind of scriptures which are in a way trying to support some of the regressive practices which were in the society, then we need to look at those scriptures, we need to reinterpret those scriptures, and the society should be more humane in nature. And we also find that the real purpose of this film was to have more universal and long ranged nature, was to in a way criticize or not accept or deprecate the planned violence of the power wielders in the name of religion and politics as well. And it was in a way explained through the two mythological problems about evils being churned out like poison, so that nectar of truth, justice and reform may emerge, as it happened during the Amrit Manthan, as the kind of idea which was there in the Indian traditions. And we also see that how it opposed the senseless violence of the rituals as well. A priest cuts off his head to propitiate or satisfy a deity. So it in a way was trying to reject these kinds of ideas, and it was focusing on need for a more humane religion, where we find that no blood is shed in the name of God. So we find that how social reform was also connected to the religious reform, because that is how the social religious reform movements they are being discussed in the Indian society, because we find that many of the social practices have religious connotations, or they have religious roots. So in that sense we find that how they were trying to bring about that kind of a change. Apart from that, we also find that Nitin Bose made a film which was talking about the fervent plea against the long standing evils of the untouchability and caste barriers through the legend of poet priest Chandidas and his love for the washerwoman Rami, and how this kind of a theme of universal love was portrayed through this forbidden emotion, and its happy culmination or the ending with the discarding of society and tradition bound religion by both the lovers. So we find that how such kind of portrayals, they were trying to question the issues concerning untouchability and the caste barriers. And we find that when such kind of portrayals they were being shown in the society, then definitely they created an impact, and they forced the viewers to think about these kinds of issues in a new way, and because of which they might have definitely created some kind of an impact on the society as well. And then we see V. Shantaram's film Dharmatma was based on the life story of poet Saint Eknath, and this film attacked the untouchability in no unequal terms, and originally it was titled as Mahatma and had strikingly too many resemblances to Gandhiji's life and preachings, and it faced a lot of censor problems and was finally revised to suit the imperial motives. So we find that during this particular period, when one is talking about these kinds of ideas, where anything which was contemporary in nature, anything which was related to the ideas of the national movement, or how Gandhian movement it unfolded, especially after 1917, we find that many of the filmmakers they got inspired by Gandhi, and they tried to make films in and around Gandhian ideology, and it was not liked by the censors, those who rejected any such kind of portrayals. And we also see during this time that how any of the films which were related to the mythological and the devotional themes, they emphasized the humanist and the reformist ideas, but they also played an important role in spreading the ideas of freedom struggle as well, because the veiled symbolism in many of the films of this times in terms of propagating the message of revolt, and they urged people to undergo personal suffering for the sake of the country. So in that sense they played an important role in changing the attitudes of the masses and socialization of the women as well. So in that way, how cinema, especially the mythological and the devotional cinema, they definitely played an important role, and how the idea of social reform was also linked to these issues as well. Another film which we would like to talk about is Franz Austin's directed film, which was based on Niranjan Pal's story The Level Crossing, and it was titled as Achut Kanya in 1936, and how this film was showing a contemporary awareness of the untouchability and the intercaste barriers in the society. And when we see that one of the characters in the film refuses to turn untouchable out, saying, "Are untouchables not human beings too? When sunlight, water, etc. are given to us by the Almighty God, then why shall we discriminate against them?" So this film was making some kind of a plea for the kind of equality which should be existent in the society, and it in a way talked about the issue of untouchability and then intercaste barriers which were there in the society. And we find that when such kind of portrayals they were being made, then definitely they were in a way creating an impact on the masses as well. Devika Rani played the lead role in this film along with Ashok Kumar, who was from a higher caste, and Devika Rani was from a lower caste, which was considered to be an untouchable in the society. So their friendship and their fascination, love and admiration for each other could be seen, and how Ashok Kumar does not feel that any kind of a distinction is there in the society between individuals. And this film also makes this kind of a plea that all human beings, they should be treated equally, they should be seen equally in the society. And this was one of the major concerns of the movement which was led by Gandhi as well, because Gandhi was also talking in that particular framework. And when you talk about the idea of removing the social inequality, but it was also concerned with the idea of national unity and integration as well, because Gandhi says that unless all people they will come on the same kind of a platform from the social point of view, then the national unity and integrity could not be achieved as well. And it was very, very important from the point of view of the national struggle as well against the British, because unless we will see that such kind of films, if they are not going to be made, then they will not be discussed as well. So from that point of view, Achut Khanna definitely played an important role at that point of time. And we also see that when one is talking about the idea of the kind of equal treatment which should be given to everyone, irrespective of their caste, religion, race, or for that matter region, the kind of language which is being used. So all these kinds of issues, they were very, very important at that point of time. They were trying to convey the kind of distinctions which existed in the society on the basis of such things, and how when we are able to remove these kinds of distinctions, then only we will be able to bring about the kind of changes which were very important from the point of view of society. We also see that in this film there was a song called Main ban ki chidiya ban ke ban ban bolu re, main dal dal ud jaऊं nahi pakdai mein आऊं. So it is also suggestive of the female protagonist being bound by the barriers of the society, where she wants to be free like a bird. And Sarojini Naidu was impressed with this film, and Gandhi had also described colonial rule as a scourge and untouchability as a plague. So these kinds of views of the various national movement leaders, where they were trying to convey the ideas of equality through in a way how the society can bring about a lot of change through the medium of films, and how the national leaders, they were also talking within that particular framework, where they were arguing that untouchability, etc., they should be removed from the society. So from that point of view, films definitely played an important role. And when the filmmakers, they got associated with these kinds of projects, where they were talking about bringing a lot of reform in the society. So one of the major concerns of the national movement was also not only with regard to the ideals which they propagated, but at the same time they wanted to bring about the social change and the behavioral change in the society. And definitely when you talk about the theme of social reform in the framework of the Indian cinema, then we find that a number of filmmakers deliberately they contributed in that sense that they wanted to bring about that kind of a reform in the society. And films were also made in that particular framework when filmmakers deliberately were making such kind of a cinema which would be very beneficial for the Indian society, because when the Indians they are going to see these films, then they are going they definitely they were to be influenced by such kind of portrayals. So we find that not only the leaders of the social religious reform movements, they played an important role in terms of trying to communicate those kinds of ideas which were to be reformed. But at the same time, the filmmakers they also took some kind of a cue from these leaders, and when they realized that their contribution could be to the society when they make films on these kinds of ideas and issues. So from that point of view, we definitely see that cinema which was dealing with the idea of social reform, it was being made, and the filmmakers they were also in a way some kind of active careers of the social religious or social reform theme which could be seen in the film. So we'll talk about further about these kinds of issues in our next lecture. Thank you very much.